today we are gathered to discuss optimizing your roster for weeks 15 through 17, aka the fantasy football playoffs, aka the greatest time to be alive. Be sure to stay tuned to the end of this show. We will cover your listener questions and submit our one move to make. At this point of the season, as we enter week 12, you should be able to tell if you're playoff bound. If you are playoff bound, you should be optimizing your roster, specifically your bench, for weeks 15 through 17. That is what today's show is dedicated to. Just some general things that I like to think about this time of year in season-long leagues. First one, the biggest one. Handcuffing is more valuable the later in the season we get. Once we get through all the buys, once we get through all of the injury Armageddon that is coupled with the buys, we have way more room on our bench for guys that are contingent values. Let's say I have Christian McCaffrey or Bijan or Barkley. It is a major priority for me at this point in the season to have Brian Robinson or Tyler Algier or Tank Bigsby. Second, if my bench is deep enough, I'd love to stash the best defenses for the fantasy playoffs. And we'll get into some of those. Not only does that help me to have what I think will be the best defenses in the fantasy playoffs, but it also blocks my opponent from picking them up. And lastly, if I have been streaming at quarterback, I think it's worth getting ahead of it. Stash some of the best quarterback streamers so that you're not left out in the cold and scrambling there as your team is in the playoffs. So this is a luxury to have here, Daigle, if you're able to optimize your bench for it. But I think there's a lot of people out there who should be looking at this right now. Daigle, anything to add on this time of year and optimizing your season-long rosters?
Still comes down to your own personal roster. You're not really taking one singular blueprint and doing it as such, because if you're strong at wide receiver, for example, and even someone who hits their ceiling, and we'll talk about a lot of players like that, were the dominoes were to fall correctly for them, you have to ask yourself, could they even crack your lineup? Perhaps a running back is still better. So again, you're just looking at your own roster and adjusting accordingly. There are some really good wide receivers out there that on some of my rosters I can't even pick up because, again, I'm too strong at the top three, so it wouldn't matter at all. Thus, I'm prioritizing my bench differently.
Yeah, so Daigle's describing a situation that I'm in right now too, where I have a team, I think it's like, a small favorite probably to make the playoffs. I've been carrying Algier, I've been carrying Ray Davis as guys that are one injury away from being really good fantasy plays. I could use a little help at wide receiver, but I'm not desperate. And now we have guys like Luther Burden is out there on the wire. Christian Watson is out there on the wire. Mark, what do you think about spots like that where it's, hey, one injury away running back, or maybe Luther Burden becomes a star or Christian Watson becomes someone I'd actually be excited to start down the stretch?
I think you kind of have to marry your own individual roster with kind of the end of season outlook and do some projecting here. Look at the playoff fantasy schedule. Say, even if DJ Moore or Rome Odunze got hurt and I have Luther Burden on my bench, am I still going to start him over the roster or the wide receivers that I have on my roster already? And looking at Burden specifically, the Bears play the Browns and the Packers in week 15 and 16. So even if Luther Burden's on my roster, those games are in Chicago, could be bad weather situations against tough defenses like that. That probably isn't going to cut it, for my starting lineup going into the playoffs. And if you do make the playoffs, it's more than likely you have a pretty good starting lineup to begin with, right? So you really need those high upside bench stashes that are going to be easy starts. And so I would prioritize the running backs there. There was, this past week I had Tyler Warren on bye. I dropped Emmanuel Wilson to pick up like Zach Ertz, and then Josh Jacobs goes down and yeah. I had to blow all my fab to get Wilson back kind of thing. So I would much rather prioritize the high upside running backs at this point of the season.
Yeah. And like, if you want to build a super team, the guys that we will have projections on, big projection changes on, will obviously come from injury, right? Like, this week, if Josh Jacobs out, which I assume Josh Jacobs out, he may have already been ruled out, but Emmanuel Wilson, we're going to have a really good projection on him this week, way more than Luther Burden or Christian Watson or anything like that. So if you're looking to build super teams with guys who could project for 15 or 20, it's always going to be the one injury away injury stuff. Let's talk specifically about some of these situations. Allow me to tech lord over to the one injury away list here that Daigle keeps. Now, I know that a lot of these guys are probably already owned in your league. Zach Charbonnet has standalone value. He should already be owned. Bashel Tutin, standalone value, already should be owned. Tyler Algier is probably owned in a lot of your leagues. There could be some spots, though, where guys have been dropped. And so somebody like a Ray Davis, somebody like a Chuba Hubbard, Ollie Gordon, Tank Bigsby, Brian Robinson, Devin Neal, these are guys that I think might be out there for people that they could pick up. Jack, I want to talk about some of the hairier situations for people on this list. You guys can peruse this list at any time. I just want to talk about some of the tougher spots here. Let's start with the Bills. If James Cook were to get hurt here, Jack, how do you think it plays out between Ray Davis and Ty Johnson?
Yeah, last year when James Cook missed a game, it was all Ray Davis. I do think it's a little bit trickier this year because Ray Davis was playing a lot more last year behind James Cooks. And now, so far this year, we've kind of seen Ty Johnson emerge as the clear RB2. And he has his own role on pass downs, but Ray Davis just has not played that many snaps. And he's running clearly behind Ty Johnson. I do think if something happens to Cook, Davis would step in as the primary early down back, but I don't think it's as clear-cut as it was last year, and Johnson could see an expanded rushing role as well. But with that being said, I do think Ray Davis would still be the handcuff you want in Buffalo. I just don't think we should expect 20-plus touches like we saw in that one game last year when Cook was out.
I mean, if James Cook went down, you can't reduce Ty Johnson's role, right? And he's already playing a bunch of snaps. I mean, he's already playing around 20, 24 snaps per game. That can't get less, right? So I'm not saying that I'd rather have Ty Johnson than Ray Davis. I think it would go base work, goal line work, Ray Davis, change of pace, pass down work, and maybe a little bit more base for Ty Johnson. And so, yeah, I think Ray Davis is a really good handcuff. We have him here at 6. I think that's about right. Not the best possible handcuff, as he would not get a true 3-down role. Mark, let's go to Ravens. If Derrick Henry were to go down, everybody is bracing themselves for Dehember. I think it could be exciting for a certain guy, but there's going to be Justice Hill in the mix as well. How do you think it goes if Derrick Henry gets hurt down the stretch here, Mark?
I think Keaton Mitchell would be the one to stash here too. We've already seen the Ravens involve him more on base rushing work so far. And then, yeah, last week without Justice Hill, they did mix in Rasheen Ali as like a pass down specialist. So I do not think if Derrick Henry went down, like Keaton Mitchell would play, 80, 90% of the snaps and get every single touch. But I do think he would be the favorite to get 15 carries in this Ravens offense, and they do get the Bengals in week 15. And Adam, you mentioned a lot of the top handcuffs right now are probably owned in most leagues, but Keaton Mitchell right now is 1% owned in ESPN league. So I do think he is one of the more attainable top end handcuffs here because of the Ravens matchup there in week 15 against the Bengals. I mean, I would be absolutely ecstatic to start Keaton Mitchell in week 15, first round of the playoffs if Derrick Henry were to go down. So he'd be the one I would prioritize. Justice Hill, I think would still could be like a flex starter or fringe starter there if you needed him to, but Keaton Mitchell would be the one I'd prioritize as the handcuff.
Yeah, and I'm curious what you think, Daigle. I kind of think that we should have Keaton Mitchell higher on this list also, just because he's been so explosive, right? I agree with you that Justice Hill is going to play a ton. Justice Hill is a actually good NFL player. He'll play on all the pass downs. But man, Keaton Mitchell is like shot out of a cannon every time he touches the ball. He needs the ball in base, though. They do not trust him in this pass protection role. So yeah, Daigle, any thoughts on moving Keaton Mitchell up a little bit here in the list?
I agree. I can definitely move him up. A player that is truly one injury away and that he's not even involved. This past game, still eight carries at least, because we were missing Justice Hill. As everyone has said, if Justice Hill was available, we would expect him to be involved. But yeah, Keaton Mitchell is certainly someone that you can stash.
Yeah, and like compared to some of these like true tier 1 guys, like if Kyron Williams went down, Blake Corum might play 80-90%. Bashal Tutin might play 80-90% if something happened to ETN. Tyler Algier, I think, would play 80-90%. These other guys that we're talking about, obviously it's a little bit hairier and tougher. So yeah, and Chuba Hubbard as well, I would throw into the mix as someone that would play an absolute insane amount if Rico Dowdle were to go down. Speaking of hairy situations here, Daigle, the Colts, I honestly don't know on this one, man. And it's so important because JT has been such a big part of people's teams. If people have JT right now, Daigle, what do you think about handcuffing the number 1 fantasy asset we have?
DJ Giddens was active the first month and a half or so of the season. He got injured and has since been healthy scratched in that time. It's been Amir Abdullah who is his backup. Having said that, if JT were actually ever injured and had to miss time, I do think it's a situation where, as you said, it's extremely murky and it could be a timeshare. It could even be Giddens not only being worked in more, but then a couple games later, since we're talking about the fantasy playoffs, out touching or outperforming Amir Abdullah, since we know Amir Abdullah's entire career. That's my concern for strictly trying to handcuff Jonathan Taylor, is that I really don't think there is a direct handcuff.
Yeah, I wish I could do something here. I want to do something, but I kind of agree that it's really tough because Tyler Goodson and Amir Abdullah have both been active ahead of DJ Giddens of late. DJ Giddens not even played a snap since week 8. He was Jonathan Taylor's primary backup in week 1, which I thought was good to see. Now, Abdullah and Goodson are both special teams players, and maybe that matters. And we see this a lot where guys are inactive if they don't help on special teams. And then if the starter goes down, well, now they're up and they're ready to go. So I think Giddens probably, but I'm not like super confident that he would be the one to own there for Indy. Last murky one I wanted to hit on, Jack, was the Eagles here. Came into the year thinking that it would be Will Shipley for sure. Then they started playing A.J. Dillon a bunch. I was like, oh no, that's not good because A.J. Dillon's not really good at NFL football. And then they make the trade for Tank Bigsby. I'm like, that's really not good for Will Shipley. So my gut lately has been if Barkley were to go down, we would see a lot of Tank Bigsby. But we do have Will Shipley here on the list down at number 20 also. Jack, what do you think happens if Barkley were to go down?
Yeah, I think this one's a little bit more clear-cut in terms of roles, at least relative to something like the Colts backfield, where I think Bigsby would be the early down guy if Saquon went down, and Shipley would get the pass down work. Even this past week with Saquon healthy, Shipley played about half the third down, so I definitely think they like him there, and they have been using Bigsby more as the early down backup. I also think if Saquon goes down, he's one of the few running backs who would materially change a team's pass rate if he goes down as a running back, where maybe we see the Eagles start to throw a little bit more. And so the question for me would be, if Saquon goes down, we know Bigsby's the early down handcuff, but how much is that actually worth? And I think it's probably an okay fantasy starter, but I don't really think it's a smash.
Yeah. I actually think Tank Bigsby is a pretty decent runner, and upcoming games for the Eagles, when we're talking about the playoffs here, week 17 against the Bills, which has been one of the worst run defenses in the NFL, week 16 against the Commanders, one of the worst defenses period in the NFL, and week 15 against the Raiders, one of the worst teams in the NFL. And so I actually think Tank Bigsby might be like good or like somewhat exciting to start in that case, because they should be controlling at least the Raiders and the Commanders game. And that would be good for Bigsby too. So yeah, I like where we have Bigsby here at number 9. I might have him in tier 1, but it sounds like maybe I'm a little bit higher on Bigsby than you guys are. Maybe because they weren't even using Bigsby, and then I complained about it on the Team by Team show. Silva made fun of me, and then the very next week they changed Bigsby's role, insinuating that yes, Eagles staff is listening to the Team by Team show. Thank you guys at the Eagles headquarters for listening. All right. Reminder, this show is brought to you by our friends at DraftKings. The NFL season is here. There's no better way to get closer to the action than with the DraftKings Daily Fantasy, the ultimate destination for football fans. Right now, our partners at DK are giving new customers a chance to play free for their share of millions in prizes with their first deposit on the app. Download the DK app and enter promo code ETR or scan the QR code to play free for your share of millions. That's for new DraftKings customers. Just download the Daily Fantasy app for your free shot today. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY at 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. 18 plus in most eligible states, but age varies by jurisdiction. Eligibility restrictions apply. Void where prohibited. Minimum $5 deposit required. One single use $3 ticket rewarded. Ticket rewards are site credits valid for use on eligible DraftKings contests. Ticket rewards expire 14 days after being issued. Ends on December 31st at 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time. See terms at DraftKings.com/promotions. Sponsored by DraftKings. Let's get to some more awkward handcuffs, perhaps, here, Mark. One that's come to my mind lately, and I know you guys are going to think I'm crazy. This kid Elijah Higgins, directly behind Trey McBride. Dude's been balling, man. If Trey McBride got hurt at the disgusting pile of tight ends that people are sifting through each week as streamers, I'm not convinced that Elijah Higgins wouldn't move near the top. So I've done tight end handcuffs before. No, when Mark Andrews was really good, and I thought Isaiah Likely was really good also. I used to do this all the time in best ball and other stuff. Like, just get me points from tight end. If it's not Mark Andrews, it'll be Isaiah Likely. Can we say the same thing, Mark, about Cardinals tight end, Trey McBride and Elijah Higgins?
When you have fantasy kingmaker Jacoby Brissett at quarterback, I mean, anything's possible there. So I do think Elijah Higgins would take over the vast majority of the routes run there. He's obviously not going to get and command the target share that Trey McBride has with Brissett and in this Cardinals offense. But I do think, we could even go to teammates there. And like we saw Michael Wilson perform really well when Marvin Harrison Jr. was out this past week. So I think Elijah Higgins, could be up there as a tight end handcuff. I'm not sure I would do it necessarily, mostly because the Cardinals have a matchup with Houston in week 15. I think you would really want it for like week 17 against the Bengals. And at that point, if you've made the title game, then, I think and you have Trey McBride at tight end, like I think handcuffing with Elijah Higgins there is probably a smart move.
Yeah. These would be really thin and like really deep, but the few other ones that I was thinking about, Daigle, let me know if any of these catch your eye. If you have JSN, if Torrey Horton were healthy, I think that would be at least interesting, but it would probably just be a lot of Shaheed and Kupp, also considering Torrey Horton is out and he's had this shin issue. The Lions guys, now that Sam Laporta is down, they're starting to get thinner. If something happened to Jameson or Amon-Ra, I feel like they have to go to Isaac Tesla. So I thought I think that would be an interesting one if you have a deep bench. The Brock Bowers, Michael Mayer thing, we saw Michael Mayer without Brock Bowers. It was fine. It was not exciting. It was fine. And then if Nico Collins were to go down, maybe Jalen Noel gets a chance, but I don't even trust them to do that much. But yeah, Daigle, any of those catch eye or any other off the board handcuffs you want to mention?
With Jaden Higgins now running more routes than Xavier Hutchinson, finally, I would think Higgins is the handcuff for Nico Collins since he just replicates him as a big X receiver. And Jalen Noel's really only gotten the opportunity when all of the team slot receivers, Christian Kirk and Braxton Berrios, were injured. Jalen Noel, like Luther Burden too, has shown he should be on an NFL field playing every snap, every single week. He's been that good when given the opportunity. So Jalen Noel's someone I haven't been dropping, regardless of Kirk and Berrios' health on my rosters. I would also add, behind Puka Nacua, Jordan Whittington has been his direct backup from the slot, especially with Tutu Atwell injured reserve now. So I really like Whittington, given how physical Puka has always played when he's available. And then really this section is about who to not drop because they're a similar outlook. For instance, you can't start Tony Pollard and Tajay Spears, but you also can't drop them on your roster because we know that if one were injured, you would absolutely want the other one because they're talented players. Yeah. Same thing goes for a player like Xavier Worthy, who right now everyone's frustrated with, but also you don't want to drop because you know what he can do, like the second half of last year, if Rashee Rice were injured as well.
Yeah. What about my boys, David Njoku, the Chief, and Harold Fannin? If one of them were to go down, I would love to have the other one there as well. But yeah, I like thinking about that. It's probably not that actionable. I don't think people should like really be doing this unless they have super deep benches, but I do find it to be an interesting exercise to try to find some handcuffs that are not at the running back position, not quite as clear.
I've got a couple at wide receiver that I think are worth mentioning too. I assume he's rostered in most leagues, but he just had one catch for 6 yards. If Emeka Egbuka were to go down, Tez Johnson, I think, would be pretty much an auto start in every league. And he's had a couple of bad games in a row, or at least low target games in a row. And then the other one would be Jalen Nailor. If something happens to either Justin Jefferson or Jordan Addison, it has been really rough for McCarthy. But the Vikings do get Dallas in week 15 and the Lions in week 17, where they should be in negative script in that week 17 game. And then the Cowboys defense is obviously one of the best matchups you can have. So I just wanted to throw those two out there as well.
Yeah, I like it. And the only one that McCarthy's had success really throwing to has been Jalen Nailor. There's something in the air. Perhaps they're showering together or something like that. But yeah, Jalen Nailor has actually had some decent plays with JJ McCarthy. Okay. So, Daigle, for the season-long bros out there, some of them have been quarterback streaming. Maybe not as much this year. I feel like quarterback play has been concentrated to like maybe the top 15 guys. And so everyone seems to have like maybe one and a half that they really like. The bottom guys have been such turbo dust. Maybe it's harder to stream this year. But for people out there who are streaming, what is your recommendation on stashing quarterbacks now to try to get ahead of this week 15 to 17 quarterback streamers?
I'm fine with it, but I would just understand again what you need. And the definition of streaming would really help that, because obviously if you have a top 5, top 6 option, or like a Drake May, Jackson Dart, you don't even need another quarterback on your roster. You're just crossing your fingers that those guys stay healthy. We clearly saw Jameis Winston try to come in and be Jackson Dart, and that wasn't the case. So it's more about, for me, these rosters that don't need streaming, making sure you don't even have a backup quarterback and you're prioritizing that last slot for instead a running back or wide receiver who could fall into more opportunity. For streaming, I would just max it at 2. I don't want to get too cute and also waste a third spot. And I feel like that's what a lot of people do with both quarterbacks and defenses.
Yeah, we'll get to defense in a sec. I just want to say, for anyone out there like looking to get ahead of it, if you are, Tua Tagovailoa gets the Bengals in week 16 and the Bucks in week 17. Both at home. Will be good weather, obviously, there in Miami. So I'm never like excited to start Tua these days, but those are two of the best possible matchups that you'll find in week 16 and week 17. Jacoby Brissett gets the Falcons in week 16 and then the Bengals in week 17. Jackson Dart, who may have been dropped while he was out, he gets the Raiders in week 17. Caleb Williams gets the 49ers in week 17. I thought that was at least interesting given the state of this 49ers defense. So yeah, there's some quarterback streamers out there. We might be a little bit too far out for me to start thinking about this. I would definitely rather be stashing running backs, live like a 3 or 4 week runway, 2 to 4 week runway, chance that they get hurt in front rather than stash a quarterback streamer at this point. Defense is another issue, Daigle, because I think everybody is stashing defense or streaming defenses, right? Or at least I am. I mean, every league I'm in, I'm basically picking up a new defense every week. And then they always try to make fun of me at the end of the year. They're like, Adam only won because he had 100 pickups. They don't realize that like 60 of those are just me changing my mind on defense 4 times a week. You know what I mean? But anyways, I digress. Daigle, how early do you start stashing defenses for the season-long bros ahead of the playoffs?
Usually a couple weeks early. Again, if you have the roster to do so. I do like to be personally a little more timid about stashing defenses, just because we get to this time of the year every single season, and this is when the offensive lines get injured, and thus then the quarterbacks fall, and the quarterbacks falling really what determines the best defense to play every single week. And so I don't like to be too aggressive, because I understand, like every year, we're going to luck box into some bad defenses that are just out there now. Remember, there are fewer teams in the playoffs also trying to pick up defenses, so you have a larger selection. And again, I'm maxing it at 2. I know a lot of people like to get more aggressive than that, though, with it.
Yeah, and the point that I made at the top is just like the worst way to lose a fantasy league is somebody picks up some defense and they drop a 20 ball down your face, and it's like, oh God, I could have had that defense 3 weeks ago and just block them, you know? And so yeah. What I brought up here is if you go to our NFL tab and then tools and research, you'll see something called DVP. We can sort our DVP by playoff weeks only, rest of season, or playoff weeks only. So here I'm sorted by playoff weeks only, weeks 15 to 17, and then the Saints have the best schedule. So if you want to check that, it's because they play Bryce Young, Justin Fields / Tyrod, and Cam Ward. The Saints do in their 3 playoff games. So really good tool here. If anybody who has DraftKit or in season can check that out there for sure.
I have a few defenses to. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. I was going to give some, but go ahead.
Okay, I was just going to say one that piques my interest is the Texans. Obviously, they're rostered in a ton of leagues, but the next 3 weeks they get the Bills, Colts, and Chiefs, who are 3 pretty dynamic offenses. So there may be a chance that people drop them in your league, and their playoff schedule is amazing, getting the Cardinals, Raiders, and Chargers. And then the Bucks, I think, are also a pretty good one, not only just for the playoffs, but after this week, they play the Rams, and then they get the Cardinals, Saints, Falcons, Panthers, and Dolphins in the last 5 weeks there. So I think the Bucks are, who are only like 20% owned after this week against the Rams, are a pretty good play that you can just like have, in your lineup the final 5 weeks of the season.
One thing about the Bucks is everybody's game plan is the same against the Bucks. They try to throw it a ton, and that's what we want when we're playing defenses against them, right? Because like dropbacks, pick sixes, strip sacks. So yeah, I think that's interesting. Even though I don't think the Bucks defense is very good,
exactly.
I think it's the right archetype to have on your team. Some other defenses, specifically for week 17. I think the Steelers have been rushing the passer better lately. They play the Browns in week 17. I thought that was a really interesting one. It'll be Gabriel or Shador, maybe some bad weather there as well. Dallas's defense has gotten healthy. I'm not sure that Dallas's defense can be one. Like, they'll still be bad, but I don't think they'll be as bad. They play the Commanders in week 17. I thought that was interesting if Marcus Mariota is starting that game. I mentioned the Saints stuff. Saints Titans in week 17. You can play both sides of that. Saints also get Jets in week 16. Lions against JJ McCarthy in week 17. At this point, until he proves me otherwise, I'm streaming defenses against JJ McCarthy for sure. Patriots I know are owned, but they do get the Jets there in week 17. But yeah, I mean, I'm looking at this a lot, especially like for earlier ones. If I think I'm going to be playing in week 17 playoff, give me the Bears at home against the Browns, or give me the Jaguars at home against the Jets. I actually don't mind getting them there right now if those are going to be like my only options, and keep them on my bench if I know I'm going to be playing in week 15. All right. Some people I know are going to ask about kickers. I don't think we should be stashing kickers. Mark's been our man in kicker land here. Do you agree, Mark? We're not stashing any kickers ahead of time.
I definitely agree. Yeah, I think way higher upside options to stash on your bench, and kicker stuff is so volatile. Like, I think we can have a decent idea of which kickers we want to stream each week, and it's just so variant that I don't think it's worth a roster spot.
All right. Couple notes just generally on schedule for me here, and I can sort by rest of season, and maybe I want to sort by quarterback or running back or wide receiver or whatever you want to do here. Just thinking about a couple teams' schedules. I know we've talked about it a ton. Lions, 6 straight dome games coming up. I also wanted to note the Eagles' schedule coming up. I mentioned their playoff schedule already, but man, Eagles get Dallas this week, then Bears, then Chargers, Raiders, Commanders, Bills. I mean, that's pretty strong for the Eagles. And so I'm worried about the pass game, but it seems like every time people get worried about the pass game, and I've been long worried about the run game this season, losing Lane Johnson doesn't help, but it's going to get much softer on the schedule there. Also, 2 games specific I wanted to note. Cincinnati, Miami in week 16 could be an absolute bonanza, and Arizona, Cincinnati in week 17 as well. We did get a report today, Joe Burrow practicing in full here on Wednesday off of that toe injury. So maybe you get Burrow versus Brissett, Burrow versus Tua in good weather in week 16 and 17. I think that's pretty exciting. Let's go to, let's go to some listener questions. We are men of the people, of course, and for the last time here, we'll take some questions from the people. Go to Jack. Jordan says, I have a strong team, first round bye, but I'm weak at tight end. Thoughts on trading Colston Loveland for Sam Laporta, putting him in an IR spot, and possibly having him come back in time for week 15. So I'd love to know who your starting tight end is in this question, Jordan. A lot of this is going to come down to news on Sam Laporta. We're recording this Wednesday around 4 p.m. Eastern. I don't feel great about Sam Laporta right now. He's gone on IR. They will not confirm that he'll be back this season, which strikes me as some type of weird / severe back injury that just came out of the stone blue. So tough question here, Jack. What do you think about this on Jordan's question, Loveland for Laporta?
Yeah, it definitely depends on who he's starting at tight end. I kind of interpreted this as he's starting Loveland, which is obviously pretty rough. I kind of think if that is the case, I would just do it and hope that Laporta comes back, because it's not like you're losing a bunch going to the waiver wire if you're already starting Colston Loveland. There is some chance that Loveland breaks out over the next month and a half, obviously, but we haven't seen huge indications of that yet, at least with Cole Kmet healthy. So I kind of think I'd take the risk. But I do think there's a pretty good chance that Laporta's a 0 the rest of the year. So you have to kind of be comfortable with that.
Yeah. They keep talking up Cole Kmet, and Cole Kmet ran a few more routes than Loveland did. They both ran like half the routes or something last week. I have not seen signs, but there weren't a lot of signs about Luther Burden moving ahead of Zacchaeus until they actually went out and did it either. So I'm not putting it past Ben Johnson. He could just wake up one day and be like, maybe I should use that kid I took the number 10 overall pick on more. It's possible. I agree with Jack. I don't think it's likely at all. They keep talking up Cole Kmet. Cole Kmet's a good player. They're winning, I guess. But yeah, I guess maybe I'm a little bit more worried about Laporta being a stone 0 all year. If you can stomach that, though, I think you should definitely do it. Mark, let's go to Phil's question here. He says, should I trade Devonta Smith or Tedero McMillan for Trey Benson? This is a 12-team half PPR league. I'm almost guaranteed a first-round buy. Shout out to you, Phil. So I'm mostly interested in who I want to start in weeks 16 and 17. So news on Trey Benson is good. Went from literal radio silence to back at practice today, Wednesday. Saw some clips of him running. Looked good. I don't know that he's going to play this week, but why not be back by week 13 for Trey Benson here? So, Mark, what do you think about this trade, Devonta or T-Mac for Trey Benson?
I was kind of hoping we wouldn't have any Trey Benson news coming into the show because I was thinking that he was a very sneaky buy candidate for the end of the season, just with the lack of news and people, taking that as a bad sign. So I think this is an awesome trade, especially if you have that first round buy, because the Cardinals do play Houston in week 15, which would be a brutal matchup for Trey Benson. But yeah, they get the Falcons in week 16 and the Bengals in week 17, about as good as you could draw it up there for the Cardinals and Trey Benson. And I think at that point of the season, we can expect he'll be fully ramped up and take on the RB1 workload there. So I would be in favor of this. I think at this point in time, I would probably trade Devonta Smith for Trey Benson over Tedero McMillan. But, I think I don't think there's much separating either of those guys at this point in time.
Yeah. I mean, both of their offenses can suddenly have 20 dropbacks in a game. The Eagles can do that and the Panthers can do that. The Panthers have shown more actually of a willingness to do that until they got forced in that script last week. Maybe the light will go off, and I don't know if it's a good light or a bad light, but what if the Panthers say, man, Bryce was throwing dots. Man, we dropped Bryce back 50 times and he actually did it. Let's give him a chance next week to have like a neutral script or a neutral game plan, or maybe a slight pass centric game plan. I don't think that's likely, but it's at least possible. And for that reason, I think Tedero McMillan, I'd rather have him than Devonta Smith right now also. Last one here, Daigle. D. Pernitsky says, I have Josh Allen, but I'm nervous about his playoff schedule. The Lamar owner could give me Lamar plus T for Josh Allen and Trey Tucker. My other wide receivers are Olave, J. Motet, Debo. What are your thoughts here, Daigle? Actually, let me bring up Bill's playoffs. Let me bring up Bill's playoff schedule, because I remember thinking about this during best ball season. I just want to see if it played out the way that I thought, because I took Lamar over Josh Allen like 90% of the time in best ball, only because of the playoff schedule at Patriots, at Browns, versus Eagles. I mean, Josh Allen can win against that, man. And I as I was doing it, I was thinking during best ball, like, I'm going to be so pissed at myself if Josh Allen has better advance rate and he outscores Lamar in the playoffs, which is definitely possible. So that was probably a mistake by me. But yeah, sorry, Daigle. Go ahead here on this trade.
Well, it's also about getting T. Higgins over Trey Tucker, right? Because we don't think the drop off from Allen to Lamar is much, if anything, especially given their schedules. And Lamar was even, remember, my buy player last week on Monday, because we expected him to struggle against Cleveland. And Cleveland, Eagles, 16 and 17, as you said, weeks. Those are Allen's matchups. So I would take this deal just because I think the upgrade from Higgins to Tucker is enough of an impact to where I don't even care about the quarterback situation.
Yeah, I agree. And Lamar is an awesome buy low still. I mean, he gets the Bengals twice still, and I know he had a bad game. He didn't run very much against Cleveland. He gets the Bengals twice in the next, 3 weeks, does Lamar? I mean,
I also feel like, because he mentioned his other wide receivers, Olave, J-Mo, Tet, Debo, like Trey Tucker is in that mix to where you wouldn't even start him every week over those guys. But T. Higgins, you would put up top, like with J-Mo, given their schedules every single week.
Yeah, agreed. All right. This is it. The last move to make segment of the 2025 NFL season. We've had some great moves to make. We've had some horrific moves to make. We've had stuff in between. Mark, I give you the floor for your first move to make of the final rest of season top 150 show of the 2025 NFL season.
I love it. Yeah, I'm gonna stay on brand here for this show and say to buy Jameson Williams and Amon-Ra St. Brown. I think we've identified the Lions as great buy low targets throughout the season. And then with the Sam Laporta injury, I think the runway here for the Lions receivers specifically is pretty amazing. They have our third best schedule for wide receivers in the playoffs, also have our worst running back schedule, which could potentially tilt a little bit more into the wide receivers' hands there volume wise. They also have our best wide receiver schedule just from now until the end of the season. So even if you need help getting into the playoffs, I think Jameson Williams and Amon-Ra St. Brown are great buys. All 6 games are in domes. They ran the highest 11 personnel of the season this past week against Philly. So it's not like, people are super down on the Lions, but I do think they fit all sorts of teams, are destined to be league winners down the stretch here. And I want either Amon-Ra St. Brown or Jameson Williams on all my teams down the stretch here.
Yeah, I mean, that really bad catch rate this past week for Amon-Ra is going to be water under the bridge. I mean, he's going to smash here. Jared Goff splits. One of my tweets about the Lions dome thing kind of lost containment and reached NFC North Twitter. And so I have like Vikings fans and Bears fans and Packers fans battling Lions fans, and there's like thousands of replies on this, people calling each other names, just outrageous. Not one person has come in with the hammer. Here's the splits. Jared Goff stats in a dome. Jared Goff stats not in a dome. This is not rocket science. Out of the thousands of people that have replied to this tweet, not one person has actually come with the easiest thing ever. Just Jared Goff is way, way, way better in the dome. And yeah, these guys are set to smash. Daigle, we're only doing one move to make this week, so make it a good one.
I like buying all the Lions. I like buying all the Ravens. The Cardinals have really become the Arizona Bengals in that even in garbage time with Jacoby Brissett, they won't let you down. So I like buying all the Cardinals. I'm going to cheat, though, and I'm going to make my final move to make 5 moves to make, because I think the top 5 best running backs that everyone should pick up and stash on their roster are Zach Charbonnet, as we continue to trend towards Kenneth Walker being used more. As I mentioned, I want to be even more wary of the players I drop. Zach Charbonnet is certainly not someone to drop. And if he is dropped because Kenneth Walker's used more, then you should go pick him up. Beyond that, though, Kenneth Gainwell, who now in the 2 games Jalen Warren was injured, has been the RB3 and RB5 on the week. Blake Corum, the direct backup to Kyron Williams, as Jarquez Hunter is a person who does not exist. Bashal Tutin behind Travis Etienne, who's even trending towards having standalone value, but unlike other backups, could overthrow the starter altogether because the coaching staff is not committed to Etienne. And then, of course, Tyler Algier, because if Bijan were to go down, we open up those routes for Tyler Algier as well.
Yeah, and I would throw Chuba Hubbard into the mix there also with those guys. By the way, breaking news into the show, Bashal Tutin limited in practice today. So good sign that Mr. Tutin is out there practicing on a Wednesday. Jack, your final move to make of the season.
Yeah, I just want to shout out Daigle's self-article show. I'll have to figure out how to figure that into my moves to make for next year. But I'm going to zag a little bit on the schedule talk and say buy RJ Harvey. He has a bad schedule for running backs rest of season. And Jaleel McLaughlin scored a touchdown. Harvey still played 61% of snaps. McLaughlin played 8 snaps. Now Harvey has the bye, so he has 2 weeks for Sean Payton to get comfortable with him as the starter. Harvey ran 20 routes on 41 dropbacks. I think that despite the schedule that he has coming up, it's 29th during the fantasy playoffs for us. I think the role coming out of the bye could be really good. And coming off a down week, I like buying low.
Agreed. Yeah, I talked about that on Team by Team with Silva, that I was actually pretty encouraged by what we saw from RJ Harvey in that game, whereas a lot of people who just looked at the box score, you'd be pretty discouraged by that RJ Harvey game. Tough for me to like trade for a guy that's on a bye at this point in the season, but if you have a good team, I think that's definitely an interesting one worth exploring. And by the way, there are still 8 teams that have not had a bye yet. I had it written down somewhere here, but I think that I lost it. But I just want people to be aware, if you are making trades this time of year, you can't just brush off the bye stuff. These teams that have these 8 teams, it's either 6 or 8 teams that have a bye, that haven't had their bye yet, worth way less if you're scrapping for a playoff spot. Hopefully that is obvious. All right. We teased mine earlier in the show. People are going to say it's too easy. Maybe it is, but I want to go out with a winner. Buy Trey Benson. Why not? Buy Trey Benson. Amari DiMercato has a high ankle sprain. If it's a real high ankle sprain, his season will be in jeopardy. If it's a fake high ankle sprain, we will see. Michael Carter, they cut him, and then they brought him back. That's how much they think of Michael Carter. Bam Knight, I think they actually like a little bit, but he's been dealing with an ankle. The one they want to see, and I think they will see a lot of, is Trey Benson. And then you also get this really good schedule in the playoffs for Trey Benson. As we mentioned earlier, home versus the Falcons in week 16, at the Bengals in week 17. So I'll go by Trey Benson. All right. Really, really appreciate everyone who has tuned into this show all season. If you're interested, we won't be back next week. If you're interested in seeing more shows, though, with us on the premium side, take advantage of the Black Friday sale next week. Follow us on Twitter. Go to the site. Check your email if you are part of our email list for our newsletter, and you'll get more information there about the sale. Also, while you're here, be sure you're following these guys who've worked so hard to bring you your top of 150 list each week, at Mark Dank, at Not J Daigle, and at Jack Miller 02. Were all 3 of those right?
Yep.
Oh my God. It's a miracle. Be sure you're following all of them for sure. For Mark, for Daigle, for Jack, for everyone behind the scenes at the rest of season Top 150 show, I am Adam. Good luck, everybody.